Good evening, everyone. I'm Gretchen Crosby Sims, the Executive Director here at the Institute of Politics. Welcome, everyone, to the first public event of the school year. Whether this is your first, fourth, or 14th year on campus, we're glad you're here, and we hope you'll continue to be involved at the IOP this year. I want to give a special welcome to Amanda Carpenter, who is a visiting Pritzker Fellow at the IOP this quarter. If you're a student, please check out our website where you can find her seminar schedule and office hours on this visit this week and again after the midterms. In case you haven't heard, there are some elections coming up in a few weeks. And this fall, a group of UChicago students have launched a nonpartisan push called UChi Votes to boost voter registration and turnout on campus. If you want to make sure you're registered, whether you're a student or not, find out early voting dates for different states, look for a nearby polling place, or make a plan to vote, please check out their website at uchivotes.com. And this year, for the first time, we'll have an early voting location on campus at Reynolds Club from October 31st to November 2nd, so it will be easier than ever to cast your ballot. No matter who you support, voting is the most fundamental part of our democracy, and we all need to take part. Upcoming events. Next Tuesday, CNN contributors Al Cardenas and Ana Navarro will be talking with David Axelrod about the future of the GOP and the upcoming midterms. Wednesday, Jeff Weaver, campaign manager for Bernie Sanders, will be discussing his new book on the 2016 election and how the Democrats will fare in 2018. You can find out more about these and our other upcoming events at our website at politics.uchicago.edu. A few notes for tonight. We will open up the floor to take questions from the audience. Please line up behind the microphone that's going to be in the center aisle. As usual, we give priority for questions to students. The first three should be from students, and we remind you that a question ends in a question mark. Please make sure that your phones are on silent, and you can note that restrooms are on the first floor. And here to formally introduce our panelists are Paula Tănănescu. Paula is a second-year student from Bucharest, Romania, studying public policy and philosophy. During her time at UChicago, she has served as a Fellows Ambassador at the IOP, and she is currently a member of the College Republicans. Please join me in welcoming Paula.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in what is to be a very informative conversation with our distinguished author and political commentator, Amanda Carpenter. Today, we will focus on her book, Gaslighting America, Why We Love It When Trump Lies to Us, in an attempt to analyze and discuss the methods employed by President Trump in order to influence and establish a narrative that captures us all. Ms. Carpenter has been a vocal opponent to President Trump since her time as a speechwriter and communications advisor for Senator Ted Cruz's presidential campaign in 2016. Before joining Senator Cruz's staff, Ms. Carpenter served as a senior communications advisor and speechwriter for Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina. In addition to her previous experiences as a columnist for the Washington Times, as well as political commentator for CNN, and countless appearances on MSNBC, Fox News, and C-SPAN, to name a few, have contributed to her thorough understanding of politics, political parties, and the side effects of it all. Ms. Carpenter describes herself as a conservative and not a party cheerleader, which epitomizes her strive to better her political party without conforming to accepted standards. In addition, this conversation will be moderated by Professor of Political Science, Eric Oliver. Professor Oliver is best known for his interest in contemporary American politics and political psychology, as well as his ongoing recent research about public support for conspiracy theories. Please join me in welcoming our remarkable guests, Amanda Carpenter and Professor Eric Oliver. Thank you.
Hi, welcome
Thank
to
you.
Chicago. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you all for coming. So I really enjoyed your book and enjoyed reading through it. It's a riveting story. And I think before we get into some of the details, maybe we could just start with what was it that motivated you to write this?
Having a front seat for the 2016 election. Watching my party succumb sort of to the trance and power of Donald Trump. I worked on Capitol Hill for pretty staunch Republican conservative senators in was there for the rise of the Tea Party and really believed in returning the party to constitutional limited government. Like, I actually believed all that stuff. I was there for it. You know, like, let's limit the spending, get some oversight over all these federal programs, and just kind of watch that all dissipate away as Donald Trump gained traction through the primary. And I was really just fascinated in the most scary way, watching all my Republican friends rationalize it and sort of just saying, well, it's okay. And they all found these different excuses to get on board with Trump because it meant that they would reclaim power. And the whole time I'm just sitting there, wasn't everything we said through the Tea Party that you campaign how you will govern? Wasn't that what it was all about? And you know, I think I've been born right, not that it means anything, not that I get a prize for being right, but it's just, you know, I was gaslit through the election. I watched my party get gaslit through the election. And I think now as a country, we're being gaslit every single day on any number of issues. And no one knows how to stop it because no one can, most people can't settle themselves with the fact that the techniques that Donald Trump used to get the nomination were effective. Like, we don't want to say lying works. Lying works like a charm if you do it with enough confidence and you can bully people into succumbing to it. And that's kind of the evil truth that I wanted to expose by writing this book, and also breaking down, you know, the very rote tactics that he keeps using again and again that are highly effective. But I just really wanted people to get honest with the fact that a lot of people will go along with the lies, big, small, in between, if it gets them what they want, because I saw it firsthand.
You tell a riveting story in the book about your experiences working on the Cruz campaign. And I want to get to a second what you mean by gaslit. But this is,
Sure,
I kept wondering this story. So you had a particularly bad interaction with operatives on the Trump campaign smearing you.
Yeah.
And I kept wondering how much of this plays into your I wonder if you could share this negative experience with everyone else, but also talk about how much do you think that this plays into a motivation for where you are right now as a never Trump Republican?
Yeah, okay, so to rewind the tape, I had an experience, which we can get into in just a second, that absolutely opened my eyes to how this works. And that absolutely became my frame of mind in seeing how Trump and a lot of his supporters enable these big lies and the incentives to go along with it. And so, it's such a gross story. I still can't even believe I wrote all about it, because you write it in a book and then you have to talk about it. It's like, oh, that really happened. Okay, so I worked for Senator Ted Cruz. We'll rewind a little bit more. I was a speechwriter for Jim Tement through 2010 through 2012. He went to go become president of the Heritage Foundation. Ted Cruz had just won his Senate election. His people came in and said, oh, would you like to come work in his comm shop? And previous to that, I had been active in the media, had been a reporter on the Capitol Hill. My plan was to always just go on the Hill for a couple years and go back to media. And so I told Cruz's people, I don't know, freshman senators are usually pretty boring. Like, is he actually going to do anything? Like, I was real cocky. And they said, well, just wait. Yeah, he's going to be good. And I said, okay, I'll give it a couple months. And of course, he came in, you know, ready to put the house on fire and really get going, which is good. It was good. I was on board with all that. He started running for president. I had two small kids, 2 kids under the age of 2. The campaign wanted people to move to Houston. Couldn't do that. So I decided, okay, this is the time. It's sad. I loved working with this office, this campaign, but this is probably time for me to go back to media. And lo and behold, did a couple of interviews with CNN. They were looking for Republican voices. Come on, you can cover the campaign. Great. All good. Everything's going swimmingly. I'm getting to talk about Trump a lot, you know, because I was pretty critical of him because he's not a conservative, he's not even a Republican, and he's kind of a train wreck. And as I became more critical of him, I started getting a lot more negative attention from the people who were getting on board with him, the Breitbarts of the world, things like that. and I don't even know how this happened, and this is kind of how the smear takes hold. There was this hashtag Cruz scandal started on Twitter, and all these reporters started swimming around saying, hey, we're looking, people say that Cruz had like these mistresses. Do you know anything about that? Of course, I'm like, I don't work for the campaign, get lost, hang up, hang up. But this kept getting more momentum online, and I would have reporters even ask me, you know, we're gonna look into this. I'm like, go and look, there's nothing there. Nobody bit, until I got a call from the Cruz campaign. I was actually dropping off clothes at my church on a Sunday afternoon, and a friend of mine who I worked with on the Hill in a long time said, Amanda, we gotta talk to you. Yeah, what's up? National Enquirer's gonna run a story, and you're gonna be named as someone who had an affair with Cruz. Huh? I said, based on what? So, like, they have like, what? We don't know, just be prepared. Okay, that's a fun story. Come home, tell my husband, hey, honey, guess what's gonna happen? And
What was his reaction? You told me.
He laughed, I cried. Because he's like, the National Enquirer, nobody cares. Like, it's stupid. Like, who cares? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. So we waited for like a week to see what was gonna happen. And then it was so sneaky how it came out. The cover was Pervy Ted, and it had the images of 5 women along the top. And our faces were pixelated out, but anybody could tell who it was. The internet figured it out pretty quick. And then Roger Stone was quoted in the piece saying, yeah, if this is true, this would really hurt Cruz with evangelical voters. And so then that was out there. And then the internet matched up the picture. It was actually a picture. It makes me so sad because it was a profile that Roll Call, which is kind of an influential Hill magazine, had written about my work for Ted Cruz, talking about, you know, what outspoken force I was to hold the party accountable. And that was my front page in that photo that my husband actually framed in our house because we thought, what an amazing piece. And that was the photo that the National Enquirer used, and everybody matched it up really quick. And so then swarm, Amanda, what do you have to say? What do you have to say? What do you have to say? And I had to go talk to CNN and say, well, I actually told them, I said, I'm hearing this story and it's coming. I just, you know, I want you guys to know if it's a problem, let me know. And they said, well, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. Let's just see what happens. Okay. So it came out and they stood behind me. They're like, this is crap. It's National Enquirer. But I still had to keep doing my job, right? I couldn't just be like, oh, I'm going to take the next month off because the National Enquirer wrote a story about me. And so everything was fine. And then I went to do a hit and they paired me up with a random Trump surrogate. And keep in mind, nobody else wrote about this story till then. It was just like a Twitter thing. I mean, it sucked. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't mainstream. And then this woman said on the air, we were talking about something unrelated, and said, Amanda Carpenter, you've been named as a mistress. What do you have to say for yourself on national television? And from then on, I said, I categorically deny it. This is tabloid trash. I can't believe you should be embarrassed for even saying this. And then it was game on. Because it was national news at that point, every outlet that had been waiting to write about it could write about it and kind of feast on my humiliation, write about the controversy. From then on, Ted Cruz had to make a statement. Donald Trump had to make a statement. And everybody, I mean, every picture I've ever had online, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was all fine. Like, I haven't done anything. But yeah, it was game on. And this is the kind of controversy that the Trump era feasts upon. And to save my job, I had to go do an interview with Jake Tapper, on another one on live TV, to try to clear my name. And it was horrible. But I was, and everybody said, well, why don't you get a lawyer? Why don't you sue? Because I want to keep doing my job. I'm not gonna, I've done nothing wrong. I can do this. But that's the kind of stuff you have to go through. And so that absolutely was a lens for me watching how these smears operate. Because at every point, as the smear advanced, I couldn't, you know, when it was bubbling up, I couldn't say, oh, that's not true. I had to wait until it landed right in my face. And then I had to fight my way out of it. And so that does inform my lens of the Trump era. Because if anybody does want to take on Trump, his surrogates, and what these people do, you have to be able to withstand those kind of attacks and not lose yourself to them. And I think that will actually be the biggest challenge for the Democrats in 2020.
So let's get to gaslighting.
Yeah.
You have the thing I liked most about the book is you bringing your expertise as a political communications person to bear and dissecting how political language and how political expression works, particularly from the Trump campaign. So could you tell a little bit us more about what you mean by gaslighting and what are its key constituent elements?
Yeah, gaslighting, I mean, it's like all over the place now. But the easiest way to kind of explain what it is, I tell people, imagine you're walking in the street. It's a beautiful day like today. The sky is shining, it's blue, and some powerful person says, hey, you, what color is the sky? And you say, well, obviously it's blue. He goes, no, it's green. And you look up, and you say, it's blue. And then he brings his friends and says, no, it's green. And you say, no, it's blue. And then maybe CNN has a giant debate panel with 30 people on stage to debate the color of the sky. And it's very possible you get to the point where you start screaming, you idiots, the sky is blue. What is wrong with you? And you look hysterical. And that's gaslighting. Or you just succumb to it and say, you know what? Maybe I can see because of their socioeconomic conditions why they thought the sky was green. Maybe I can see that. And maybe they're right. And maybe we should do a study to see how many ways the sky can be green. I mean, it's just kind of like bullying tactics where they actually change reality and make you question your sanity, which I feel like we're all doing on a day-to-day basis, sadly.
So can you explain some of the specifics? Because you outlined
Sure,
a very particular set of elements that I think are really informative to sort of back up what's actually going on in this.
Yeah, I think Trump has a very specific method to his madness. And in the book, I do outline 5 steps because he's not anything special. He actually just keeps doing the same things over and over again really effectively. And so the birtherism conspiracy is really the template for all of this. The first step that Trump takes again and again, he sort of stakes out politically toxic territory that has a lot of upside. So when Trump came on the scene, the birtherism stuff, it wasn't new. He didn't invent it. That came during the 2008 campaign, which John McCain rejected. It's still kind of out there. But then Trump started doing interviews through Obama's second term saying, "Did you hear anything about this? I think there's something to it." So that's the first step. He stakes out the narrative, which no one else will touch, which has a lot of upside for him if he is nervy enough to take it on. And then the second step is what I call advance and deny. And I think this is the central thing to understand about Trump because he does it so many times. And it's a way of claiming this narrative but not taking responsibility for it. And one of the ways he does this, he'll go and do these interviews and say, well, there's a lot of other people talking about Obama not being a citizen. I'm just asking questions. He advances the narrative but denies taking any responsibility for it. He really did it famously in that interview about the Russia investigation. Well, there's nothing to Russia, but I fired James Comey because of it. Advances it and denies it. And he did it more recently with Rod Rosenstein, saying, well, there's other people saying I can fire him and I would have cause, but I'm not going to do it. This is something, once you start to learn this trick of his, you won't be able to unsee it. And it is really good at getting media attention, but him not like having to be tied to this course of action. The next thing he does is create suspense. He says, well, like he did with birtherism, I'm looking at this and I'm sending investigators to Hawaii. 2 weeks. 2 weeks I'll have more information. And the media says, great, well wait 2 weeks. What can you tell us until then? And then the 2 weeks comes and goes and they forget about it. But in the meantime, he waits for someone to pop their head up and say, Donald Trump, that's insane. Why would you question Barack Obama's citizenship? And then he starts to attack them. He starts discrediting the opponent. So while you're waiting for the suspense to produce something, it doesn't. He started the fight. He wants the fight. And then ultimately he claims victory. And go back and watch the press conference he did at the Trump Hotel in DC when he finally had to get to the end of this citizenship conspiracy. I think it was like 48 words. He got everybody to the hotel after he gave the journalists a beautiful tour of his wonderful new digs, and said, well, sure, he's a citizen, but Hillary Clinton started this. I finished it. I'm the one that resolved this situation, and it's over now. He claimed victory. He claims victory in any situation, no matter how preposterous the circumstances. And it's not because he's right. It's just because he has the nerve to do it. And a lot of people will go along with a winner, even if it's completely absurd. They'll say, yeah, you know what, Hillary did start it, he did resolve it, and even though nothing came of it, it's good that he asked some questions. And so that is the gaslighting cycle, the 5 steps, which I think I can apply to almost any situation that he's taken on. But it's highly effective, and we can't turn away from it.
So I think that's a really great assessment of Trump's communication style. I want to push you on some issues on the book here. So that's Trump's shtick.
Yep.
But everybody's got a shtick.
Sure.
And so what is it that's so different or particular about Trump's shtick as opposed to, say, the shtick of a Ted Cruz or an Elizabeth Warren or any other prominent public figure that has their own communication strategies?
This is so outrageous, you can't turn yourself away. How many times have we said, can you believe what Trump said since 2015? We're still saying it about his rally last night. Can you believe what Trump said? He is so outrageous. He continues to defy what we expect of a leader that it gets so much media attention. It's almost impossible for someone with a less outrageous method to crack through. And it's that fact that he continues to surprise us that makes it so powerful.
But the formula is effective, but I mean, politicians obscure the truth. They try to lead us on. They try to say things. And so I'm just trying to get a sense of what is so magnetic about this, or what is categorically different about Trump than, say, anybody else.
President Clinton lied about Monica. Nixon lied about Watergate. I think the difference with Trump is that normally politicians tell lies to cover their butt when they get caught doing something wrong. Trump proactively lies almost for entertainment value. He proactively goes after people to take up all the media oxygen. He's completely comfortable doing that. And the reason why he does that, how we learned that, he's an old school New York tabloid king. He is king of the tabloids. And our politics right now is much more about entertainment than it is about actually finding qualified people that can govern.
So one of the things that comes out in the book that leaves me somewhat confused is the relationship of Trump to conservatism in the United States.
It's confusing.
So Trump dominates the party. And one of the things that I can't help but wonder is to what extent Trump is an outgrowth of conservatism or a certain kind of conservative rhetoric. So I'm going to read a passage from the book that kind of struck me as strange, and I'm wondering how you might reconcile this. So this is, you're talking about abortion rights activists in the Democratic Party. And you say, the modern Democratic Party and the mainstream media had almost overnight turned radical on abortion, and it was as if no one outside the conservative bubble cared. President Bill Clinton's old approach that abortion be, quote, safe, legal, and rare, unquote, would have him drummed out of the party today. The pro-choice left advocates abortion on demand, anytime, anywhere, and many members of the mainstream media seem to agree. I'm going to skip down to liberal activists framed abortion as a source of pride and female empowerment, a callous attitude that is now frequently expressed by women. Consider the following Goonies actress, Martha Plimpton, appeared at a Planned Parenthood event in Seattle where she told the audience, quote, "I've got a lot of family here, some of whom are here in the audience tonight. I also had my first abortion here at the Seattle Planned Parenthood. Yay," she continued. "Notice I said first, and I don't want Seattle, I don't want you guys to feel insecure. It was my best one. Heads and tails above the rest. If I could Yelp review it, I totally would," unquote. The old Clinton mantra practically seems quaint. So when I read something like this, I'm thinking like, wow, this is the kind of thing that oftentimes occurs in a highly polarized media environment, which is about taking an opposition view that you don't necessarily agree with, taking an extreme example, in this case, the Martha Plimpton quote, and somehow or another making a gross generalization about this. And I'm trying to see what the difference is between this kind of communication strategy and this take and gaslighting, because I'm not necessarily seeing a big gap between this type of rhetoric, which is, I think, a very provocative characterization of people who have abortion rights, and a kind of communication strategy that a Donald Trump employs.
Well, I've got to say, when I wrote that passage, it wasn't about a communication strategy.
But you're employing a communication strategy. That's, I think, common.
Well, I've got to say, and I'm just speaking as Amanda Carpenter here, a person, I read a lot of women's magazines. I am pretty entrenched in, that kind of Refinery 29, glamour, and how abortion is normalized in a way that I find shocking on a day-to-day basis, where young women are told that getting abortion is something as trivial as getting your nails done. And the deep psychological consequences, just grappling with the gravity of that situation, is not recognized. And that is something that deeply troubles me to the core. That's me not picking out a straw man. That's me watching what is bubbling up in feminist literature and being shocked and driven in a way that I don't understand. I certainly understand how women get in bad situations, but with the advent of science, Plan B, birth control, I struggle to understand why abortion on demand up to 20 weeks is something that is almost mandated by the Democratic Party. I'm looking for pro-life Democrats, or at least somebody that would support some restrictions on that procedure, because I do think it's damaging to women. I think it's extremely damaging to tell women that you can go have that procedure and be able to walk out like you did a pedicure. And that is something that young women are told. So that was me being really honest about what I think makes Democratic candidates completely non-starters to a lot of Republican women.
Okay, I guess my point is, I would disagree in terms of, I think there are a lot of people who have pro-choice viewpoints that the Martha Plimpton quote does not epitomize.
I would like to hear from them more. I would.
Okay. Let's move on. Something else that's, I think, really, I have to say is kind of confusing in the book is Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
Because in some sections of the book, it's sort of early on, you talk about Hillary Clinton and you bring out the Benghazi charges and you describe Hillary Clinton vis-a-vis Benghazi and that whole thing. And that sort of sounds like the kind of standard Republican charges against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, well, when I talk about that, I think it was important for me to demonstrate why Hillary Clinton would never be an acceptable candidate to any Republicans, and how going into the 2016 election, where the choice was between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, she never had a chance. So that was part of that, and kind of explaining, how people were in the barricades so hard against her.
Okay. Later on in the book, though, when you're talking about, there's a chapter here, which is a really fascinating chapter about conspiracy theories in the paranoid style, and I'll quote again from you.
Which I think she got the full brunt of that in 2016.
Yeah, so enter Hillary Clinton, a case study of how far the imagination of the paranoid American mind can be stretched. Clinton has been a lusty target for the conspiratorial right ever since she came to the national scene. The list of conspiracy theories that have dogged Hillary Clinton over the years is legend. The longest lasting can be traced to an email that has flouted through thousands of inboxes during the past few decades that purports to contain a list of roughly 50 people the Clintons allegedly murdered to cover up their unknown crimes.
You guys have got that email. I know you have.
Yeah.
We all have. Not saying it's true.
Your first book
Yeah.
was a pretty strong indictment against Hillary Clinton.
Uh-huh.
You bring in the Benghazi sort of allegations, and there's still something that's not necessarily clear about that. So because arguably a lot of the Benghazi, since was a lot of smoke and a very strong partisan effort to sort of discredit Clinton through the investigative, kind of
The 11 hours?
Yeah, exactly. Yet at the same time, so you're both embracing this. At the same time, you're acknowledging that Clinton herself is a kind of target of this paranoid style.
I don't think you
So
think
I'm just wondering how you reconcile that.
how I'm embracing it. I think conspiracy, part of me talking about how gaslighting works. I spend a lot of time in the book talking about how conspiracy theories work and how people try to ignore them and say this doesn't matter, but it actually does matter a lot, because once Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, people were so deeply suspicious because of things like the weird body emails, the allegations about killing Kathleen Wiley's cat, which Lindsey Graham actually brought up in an interview with The Atlantic this week, which was pretty amazing to see that kind of become full circle, that these things are powerful because whether they're legitimate or not, it seeds an incredible amount of distrust with her as a candidate. And there's no question that affected her in the 2016 election. I mean, if you keep watching the wild things, Pizzagate, right? You guys all know what I'm talking about, but that never became a national news story. But you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And that, I'm not going to say it moved Republican voters, but it's part of what made her a non-starter in a way that became much easier for Republicans to support Trump. And I'm not legitimizing that, but this is one of the hard truths where I want you to understand that these types of things are effective. And these things must be combated on some level, because just ducking your head in the sand and ignoring it is a sure recipe to lose.
But you don't see a connection between those two. So you can object to Hillary Clinton as a candidate for any number of reasons.
Right.
But then to go ahead and propagate a set of highly partisan and spurious claims, i.e. saying Benghazi.
Well, what did I propagate? Because in the book I'm explaining what happened and why conservatives did not trust her on Benghazi and why they subjected her to 11 hours of hearings, because that trust was not there. They were so convinced that Hillary Clinton was a person who would never be honest with them, that they went through 3 years of investigation that actually turned up nothing.
But you don't see yourself as playing a part of that?
In what respect?
Well, both in terms of repeating the Benghazi accusations here, which
But this is
turned
the
out to be
thing,
largely
just
baseless.
ignoring it and pretending like this didn't happen. This stuff consumes conservative media, which I came from, which I was a part of, and I understand how persuasive that is to people. And I'm not a part of that anymore. I almost certainly took a break from that by writing this book.
Sure.
And I think it's part of my mission to coming places like this to tell you that this stuff works. And saying, well, that's not legitimate and wasn't fair is not an argument that is going to win voters.
Let me take another example, which I thought was kind of interesting. And this is where I guess it's part of, I see this kind of blurring between sort of a one kind of communication style being used to then talk about another kind of communication style. And so this is a chapter, it's on the cult of Keck. And you're describing here the opioid epidemic and sort of the self-destructiveness that's going on kind of around white male identity. And you say at one point, a generation of white men were killing themselves and barely a whisper of advocacy was being done on their behalf. Going on, you say, to this day, there is no socially appropriate way for white males to express grievances without the risk of being branded as sexist or racist, which is why the alt-right was formed and why it continues to exist in such an ugly fashion. If someone's going to be unfairly branded as a bigot, the thinking goes, why not go all in? So there's an interesting point I have here, because,
And keep in mind, I'm not endorsing that.
No,
I'm just saying from my views, from what I've witnessed within my 10 plus years in the conservative movement, that's my observation.
But I, as a white male, I'm not feeling like anyone's not advocating on my behalf. I kind of look at, hearings on, look at the Kavanaugh hearings and sort of just the composition of the Senate committee.
Yeah.
So there's this interesting, the tone of this struck me as kind of odd because as a conservative, I always assumed one of the bulwark tenets of conservatism was sort of self-reliance and individual responsibility. And suddenly there's a tone creeping in here of both kind of this identity politics around white male and a sort of victimization.
Yeah, and
of
that's
white
what
males.
I'm explaining. The alt-right is founded on this newfound white victimhood, which I think you can kind of see all over the place now. Traditionally, of course, white men have been the beneficiaries of society, but you can tune into Fox News, Donald Trump, and this is like the embrace of white grievance. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from fellow people I've traveled with, well, you can have all these kinds of black groups on campus, but why can't we have a white group? And so they're turning this victimhood against everyone else. And Donald Trump epitomizes that, I think. Look what happened at the Ford hearings. Donald Trump Jr. just today was saying, well, I'm not worried about my daughters, I'm worried about my white sons. And somebody coming back on them. And so this is absolutely a phenomenon that is happening, whether you agree with it or not. This is how the game is being played.
So let's talk about conservatism now. I'm very curious about where someone like you, as a never Trumper, sits within the conservative movement. And you're on CNN, which is the enemy now. You've written a book, lambasting Trump. But you're still going to various events, and you're still out there speaking to a conservative audience. How is your life in the wilderness? And tell me about this experience.
It's weird. I feel very homeless. Honestly, all the opportunities that would have normally been on track for me as a Capitol Hill staffer, with a Republican president coming into town, were there if I would only get on board with what Trump was saying or doing. I couldn't do it. Most of my friends found ways to do it. And so I am alone. I go on CNN where I'm lucky I can speak my mind and just have that track, but there's no professional guarantee for there's no reward. This is kind of this funny thing that a lot of the Trump people say. It's oh, well, the never Trump people just do it for attention and to write a book. I'm happy. This book was a thrill to write. I got to put my heart and soul into it and say what I wanted to say. But that is no replacement for a federal job for the next 10 years by any means. And that's okay. I think this is important. It is my hope and prayer that this is just kind of a fad and a weird thing that the Republican Party had to go through. But I'm under no illusions that the Republican Party will take any kind of traditional course of conservatism back. I sort of think Democrats are the only hope of accountability that the Republican Party has at this moment in time. And so that's why I feel pretty comfortable just kind of putting this on the line, because I think there's a lot of reluctant Republicans like me who, given the right Democrat, maybe we say, this was a really hard moment in time. We thought we would do all this to get a judge, maybe not two, the way things are going, and say, well, we're open to trying something different. And so, I just come out, I'm honest, and let the chips fall where they may. God will find a way for me. I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, great. Should we open it up for questions now?
If there's any students, I'm actually an alum now, so 3 students should cut me, but otherwise I have one.
Come back for a bonus year.
Hi, my name is Matt Enlow. I'm a recent alum of the law school, and I just found out I passed the bar on Monday. So,
Congratulations.
So, like the professor was alluding to earlier, your new book talks about the danger of Trump's promotion of conspiracy theories, but in your 2006 books, you promoted Hillary Clinton's conspiracy theories that formed the basis of Trump's ongoing narrative. You described him as a train wreck at the start of this event, but the way that your book talks about him, it describes him as some sort of genius. Are you gaslighting us, or do you have some way of reconciling these positions?
I keep telling people, I just want you to recognize these strategies are effective. I don't want them to be effective anymore. And that's part of me like laying out, this is what he does. I want everybody to keep falling for it. Because although they are successful in winning elections, I don't want people to win like this ever again. And so yes, it is a train wreck, but train wrecks still have a lot of force and can accomplish something no matter how crazy.
I think part of what the professor was trying to ask you is that you seem to have some part in promoting these conspiracy theories back in 2006. Are you doing anything to reckon with that now?
I'm confused about what conspiracy theory I promoted.
I mean, I don't want to tell people to buy a book full of conspiracy theories, but it has basically all the big stuff in there.
And no, it doesn't. The book I wrote in 2006 was about what Hillary Clinton did as a U.S. Senator. I deliberately stayed away from all the other things that happened through the Clinton administration because I wanted to evaluate her fairly on the merits of her own career. I actually felt pretty strongly about that. And so what her book looks at is the file and what she did as a U.S. Senator. And so if you have an issue with that, I'm happy to talk with that about you.
Hi, my name is Eduardo. I'm a first-year graduate public policy student over at the Harris School. A couple of weeks ago, a study determined that approximately about 3,000 people died in the hurricane that struck Puerto Rico. And then a short time later, Trump called it essentially a democratic conspiracy.
Yeah.
How do people like us from Puerto Rico, who not only are being gaslit by the president, but also don't have any voting rights to even essentially do anything about it, don't have any senators, don't have representatives, how do we fight back against this?
I think part of the reason he got away with that, or a lot of people didn't care, is because a lot of people don't have connection to Puerto Rico that they do a U.S. state. I mean, that is just the sad reality of it. And it resonates with a lot of people, and so we just have to, I don't know what to say other than you have to appeal to the family that are here, people that do have representation. But it's very sad, and I think it's very easy to look at the difference in the way that the hurricane in Texas was handled versus Puerto Rico to see how grossly that was mismanaged.
Hi, thank you for being here. I had a question. You've spoken about it a little bit, but what areas of democratic policy making from your research do you think would resonate the most with Republicans in addition to abortion rights?
Yeah, well, I would say by and large, it feels unfair to give this advice to Democrats because it's sort of not their problem, but I'm telling you this is what it would take. You have to convince Republicans that you aren't scary, that you're not going to take all their money, that you're not going to give amnesty for all and let the country be overrun by terrorists coming from the southern border. I mean, it sounds laughable, but I'm telling you, that is what people believe. And having people, like a socialist, become an avatar for the Democratic Party is not reassuring to Republicans. And so I would hope, and I understand that Democrats would be fully within their rights to say after this, we're never compromising again, whatever, get lost, we're going to burn it all down. But if they could just find a couple issues, whether it be abortion, immigration, taxes, school choice, to give to Republicans to at least convince them that we can trust you on a couple things, that would go a long way.
But can I push you on that? Because one could say arguably that Hillary Clinton was about as conservative, in some dimensions, about as conservative as a Democrat there would be. I mean, she was a total hawk and really about assertion of U.S. power. And that didn't seem to go so well. Is it even possible, given the level of polarization, particularly in our media environment, and the way where people are getting their information and what they're looking for in their information, for even that to even happen?
I mean, I think Hillary Clinton had 30 years of Republican politics just working against her on some level. And I do ask Democratic friends that I run into, I said, well, what did Hillary Clinton offer Republicans? And they'll say, well, she had Michael Bloomberg speak at her convention. And I'm like, that's not enough. A couple policies would have made a big difference. But, her calculation was she's running against Donald Trump. Why should she offer anything? Which was rational, but, didn't work in the end.
How do you see a way back to the Republican Party becoming once again the party of Lincoln?
Yeah, I have a two-word hope, Nikki Haley.
Well, it does require some figure who will do it, but I think from the interview you had now, it's interesting that people on the left don't see how they too were engaging in a politics that had a disregard for the truth. And it's really a kind of Machiavellianism which is pervasive really everywhere in business, and that we don't judge a statement by whether it's true or false, but by whether it's useful to have other people believe it.
Yeah.
And this is pervasive advertising. One could talk about the curriculum of the Harvard Business School and human resources as a kind of deception to get employees to not really to distract them from going after more wages. There are just too many examples to go into. So if the Democratic Party goes further to the left and engages in their own kind of like left-wing ideology, which has little to do with the truth, that would seem to sharpen the partisan division of two, in like the movie Rashomon, two just completely different narratives. But against that is there the possibility of a bipartisan acrimony that's tighter toward the center, as might have happened when Jeff Flake and Chris Coons decided, well, maybe we'll have the FBI find out what really happened. That might be a hopeful example.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest temptation among Democrats in 2020 will be to adopt Trump's kind of tactics and use it against him, which, again, perfectly, I understand where that is coming from, but that will leave a lot of people in the middle, you know, off the table. Someone like Jeff Flake, who I think has been struggling to do the right thing, has found that he has no voice left in the party, and he's leaving it, just like Paul Ryan. They're just giving up their careers and saying, enough with this. And so I hope that our politics don't continue to turn good people off like that.
Hillary Clinton gave about 11 hours of, she spoke for about 11 hours about Benghazi. Would you like to see Trump speak with Mueller? And would you encourage other Republicans to have him do so? Because he's always comparing himself to Hillary. This is a wonderful opportunity for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the Russia story is untold, has so much more troubling details than Benghazi ever did, quite frankly. I'm not sure that him talking to Mueller will clear anything up. I'm pretty sure Mueller will be able to get more information, more verifiable information on his own. And so I'm just as eager to read that report as anybody whenever it comes out.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm also a first year at Harris. And I was just wondering your opinion on, it seems like every time Trump takes part in gaslighting, the Republican establishment, whatever that means anymore, goes through the same 48-hour cycle of expressing horror, and then it's as if it never happened. And I guess my question then is, what role do you think Republicans, like Ted Cruz, for example, have to play in calling out gaslighting and addressing it?
I think we've seen from the last, year and a half, since Trump became the Republican nominee, that most Republicans have no interest in really calling him out. The people that have been most effective in doing that, or at least tried, Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, Paul Ryan to some degree, have found the situation untenable. The Republican Party will not tolerate Republicans who try to hold the president accountable. That is this sad story. And it's kind of this fantasy that I think people keep having that, like, oh, eventually someone in the Republican Party is going to stand up and do something. No, they surrendered to Trump a long time ago. Once Reince Priebus made the presidential candidate sign that stupid oath to say, I will support whoever the Republican nominee will be, it was over. That was a non-binding oath. It meant nothing, but it had such psychological pull that I was like, oh, well, I said I'd support the nominee, so what am I going to do now? I can't break my promise, and yet you go along with all this other stuff. That bet has made, it's done, it's over. I'm kind of to the point I'm no longer looking for heroes. I'm looking for the next conflict which will be the 2020 election, where I hope somebody can at least put him in his place, if not beat him outright.
Do you think this is from your view inside of Washington, is this something that's just endemic to hyperpolarization? So if the Democrats had their version of Trump, that
Michael
had
Avenatti,
Sean Penn,
yeah,
fill in the blanks.
yeah, Mark Cuban gets thrown around,
right. That they would be doing the same thing. Someone who had had control, who was animating the base to such an extent that it kowtowed the party establishment into going along. Or is there something particular about the Republican Party that made them susceptible to this?
I think it's the story of victimhood that Republicans have sold themselves on, that we're the underdog, everyone is out to get us, we have to get ours. I think the media is, the role of conservative media, sometimes I don't know if we have a state-run media or a media-run state. Truly. I mean, if you look at the poll of Fox News, the persuasiveness, and sometimes I don't know who's telling who what and who's actually in charge. And so the number of people that view this as a form of lifestyle entertainment is very, very big. And it's largely because a lot of conservatives have felt the mainstream media is out of touch, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go with these people who make me feel good about my political decisions at all costs. And that bubble is almost impenetrable at this point.
Hi, Sadie Soto, current high school student. So you've been speaking a lot in your book and just around doing talks about making people realize that they're being gaslit, and there's a lot of gaslighting going on. But so is a lot of other mainstream media, or just media in general. We see a lot of articles online how Trump is lying and how what he says is not actually fact. But we also see the rise of a lot of people still believing Trump's lies. So what would you say is a better effective approach instead of informing people and educating people that they are being gaslit, because it doesn't seem to be super effective? What's another effective approach on people realizing?
Yeah, good question. I think the biggest response to Trump's lies has been for the media to come out and say, let's do some fact checks. Fact checks will solve everything. No, people that are inclined to believe Trump do not want to be told they're wrong. They really don't. I mean, have you ever tried to send a fact check to your friend and be like, look, here's why you're wrong? You know what they're going to do? Read the headline, delete it. Telling people you're wrong is not the answer. The hard work of actually uniting the country and getting us back together is finding the shared set of values that we want to work together on. That has been obliterated. That's hard. It's a messy question. What do we want to do together on as a country? What do we care about? What kind of country will we be? Those are actually the big underlying questions we're grappling with. And sending a fact check about, Donald Trump's tax returns, it's not going to do it.
All right. Hi, I'm a third year in college. Thank you both for being here. I'm kind of interested.
Could you speak in the mic?
Thank you.
Hey,
all
is
right.
your name Mike? No.
Everybody hear me? Great. I'm interested more in hearing about your thoughts on what's the best way to deal with conspiracy theories, because it seemed like there was a little bit of tension in the conversation. On the one hand, with the birtherism, when you were talking about that kind of Trump initial experience, it seemed like the best option was to not cover it. But then later, it was more of a discussion about how to not keep your head in the sand. So where do you stand in the in-between on that?
I think the best thing is to cut it off early. Listen, conspiracy theories are a lot of fun. I used to, as a kid, I was 12 years old. I wanted a subscription to the Weekly World News because of Bat Boy. I thought that was hilarious and cool, and I was really into Loch Ness Monster. But when it comes to politics, the reason why Trump got away with this is because people were so entranced by the fact, oh, he's going there. He's going to ask questions about Obama's birthplace, and we're going to cover it. I mean, it was a media firestorm because everyone was so entertained by the fact that he was going to go there, and they were going to write stories about it. And really, if he had been boxed in early by saying, excuse me, sir, do you really believe that? Yes or no? But because for 3 months, he got away with just asking questions, and I'm going to look into this, rather than someone saying, do you actually think he's disqualified to be president? Yes or no? That's the kind of thing, once people start to go into fringe crazy territory, they shouldn't be allowed to just romp around in it and bring all their friends, because you're not going to stop that party. once it starts. And so that's why, part of writing this book about the role of conspiracy theories, I want to tell people you can't give this stuff oxygen. If it's a matter of right or wrong, or black and white, you really need to box people in early and make them take responsibility for what they're saying, rather than just grabbing the clicks and sound bites and getting from it what you can, which is a media problem, not a problem for most people. Thanks.
Hi there. My name is Noah Whitman. I'm a second year in the college. And my question for you is, recently Brett Stevens, a former Never Trumper, described your former boss as a serpent covered in Vaseline. For doing things.
Seems like some people don't like Ted Cruz.
Right. Well, no, but so I think the question I have though is, he's being called these things partly for behavior like sending a summons to elderly Texans, trying to convince them to give money in a way that is somewhat coercive, and doing other things that are sort of questionable on an ethical level. And I guess my question is that you seem to suggest that the way that Democrats win back Republicans is that they have to move their policies further to the center. But I think that if you actually look at what's going on in Senate races across the country, that it's in fact the the Democratic senators running in red states who are running further to the left, but they're running more in a sort of we're all Americans, trying to bring unity, even though their policies are further to the left. I'm thinking like Beto O'Rourke, and less talked about like John Tester in Montana. So I guess my question is, given that evidence, why do you think that Democrats need to move further to the center to win back Republicans when, like the moderator said, that's something that didn't work for Hillary?
Well, every race is different, and we'll see how this shakes out. But if the goal is to get a less polarized electorate and to get more towards actual unity, yeah, of course I think that would be beneficial for Republicans to give in a couple issues. And I think those Democrats that are running in red states, while some of them, like Beto, do have a highly progressive agenda, they're not campaigning necessarily on those things, which, take for that what you will. But, and I think I said a number of times throughout this that I would completely understand if Democrats say, forget this. We're going far left. We don't care what the Republicans have said or done because what Donald Trump has been so awful. We don't feel like compromising. What I fear is that you're going to get some far left candidate that wins, and then you're going to have Donald Trump and, I don't know what, Bernie Sanders, pick your McGovern. And we have something much worse, much more angry than the 2016 election. That's what I'm fearful of.
Hi, my name's Dave Komanecki. After what candidate Trump said about Senator Cruz attacking his wife's appearance and accusing his father of being involved in the Kennedy assassination, wasn't it self-abasing of him to come around and endorse Trump? Didn't those charges just simply go on beyond the pale?
I wasn't advising him when he did that.
Okay. Wasn't that beyond the pale, beyond any decent limit?
I don't agree with it. It's not what I would have advised. I think it was even controversial within the campaign. But I think what the campaign would tell you, and keep in mind I don't speak on behalf of it, Texans elected Ted Cruz to represent them. They don't want to see a candidate/senator who has sour apples and isn't going to work with the president because he lost the election. And so to have any hope of being effective, he wanted to put it past him. I couldn't have done it. And that's why I'm not a politician and I'm just a writer.
Okay.
Maybe a mayor first.
So, everyone, if we could give a warm round of applause.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.